The Belt and Road Initiative (BRI) launched by China in 2013 has emerged as a pivotal element of China's foreign policy and global economic strategy. This ambitious project encompasses a vast network of infrastructure investments, trade routes, and economic partnerships across over 140 countries, primarily spanning Asia, Europe, and Africa. While the BRI aims to enhance global connectivity and economic growth, it has raised significant concerns in the United States and among its allies regarding its potential implications for U.S. interests and the international order. Common concerns. 1. Debt trap diplomacy. A core criticism of the BRI is the accusation of debt trap diplomacy, where China allegedly extends loans to developing countries that they cannot repay. This has led to fears that countries may have to concede control over strategic assets to China, effectively losing their sovereignty. Notable examples include Sri Lanka's Hambantota port, which was leased to a Chinese company after the Sri Lankan government struggled to repay loans. Reports suggest that several other countries, including Pakistan and Djibouti, may be facing similar predicaments. 2. Geopolitical rivalry. The BRI is perceived as a strategic effort by China to assert its influence globally, potentially undermining U.S. partnerships and alliances. The competition for influence in developing countries has intensified, with the U.S. viewing the BRI as a challenge to its traditional leadership role in international affairs. In response, the Biden administration has initiated alternatives such as the Build Back Better World (B3W) initiative to provide infrastructure support to developing nations, aiming to counterbalance the BRI's reach. 3. Economic and technical standards. The BRI also facilitates the export of Chinese technical standards, which raises concerns about the potential reshaping of global regulatory frameworks to favor Chinese interests. This is particularly evident in the Digital Silk Road aspect of the BRI, which encompasses the expansion of Chinese technology and telecommunications infrastructure, posing risks regarding data security and surveillance. Differences between sources. Council on Foreign Relations (CFR). The CFR adopts a nuanced perspective on the BRI, acknowledging its potential to foster infrastructure development in participating countries while cautioning against the long-term economic and political risks for the U.S. and its allies. Air University source. This source presents a more critical view, framing the BRI primarily as a tool for China's geopolitical ambition and a direct challenge to the U.S.-led international order, emphasizing the need for a robust American response. Timeline of key events. 2013, the BRI is announced by President Xi Jinping. 2017, the initiative is incorporated into China's constitution, solidifying its importance in national policy. 2018, the U.S. begins to vocally criticize the BRI, with officials highlighting its predatory nature. 2021, the Biden administration launches the B3W initiative at the G7 summit as a strategic counter to the BRI. Key projects posing threats to U.S. interests. 1. China-Pakistan Economic Corridor (CPC). As the flagship project of the BRI, CPC is designed to connect China's western provinces to the Arabian Sea through a network of highways, railways, and pipelines. The project has been marred by allegations of corruption, debt distress, and concerns over China's growing control over strategic assets in Pakistan, including the Gwadar port, which has significant military implications. 2. Hambantota Port, Sri Lanka. This port serves as a prime example of the debt trap diplomacy narrative, where a struggling Sri Lankan government leased the port to a Chinese company after failing to repay loans. The strategic location of this port raises concerns for U.S. interests in the Indian Ocean region, as it could potentially facilitate Chinese naval operations. 3. Digital Silk Road. The initiative includes investments in digital infrastructure, telecommunications, and e-commerce, allowing China to extend its influence in the tech sector. This raises national security concerns for the U.S., which is wary of the implications of Chinese technology and standards on global cybersecurity and data privacy. Use cases in data. The CFR estimates that the BRI could contribute up to $7.1 trillion to global GDP by 2040. However, it notes that the majority of BRI contracts favor Chinese firms, with 89% of contracts awarded to Chinese companies, limiting opportunities for U.S. firms and local businesses in participating countries. Project delays and cancellations have been reported, particularly exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic, leading to increased scrutiny of the sustainability and viability of BRI projects. The U.S. response to BRI. The U.S. has become increasingly critical of the BRI, viewing it as a strategic threat. The Trump administration's approach was marked by vocal opposition and efforts to dissuade countries from participating in BRI projects. The Biden administration has continued this trend, focusing on developing alternative initiatives like B3W to support infrastructure development in a manner consistent with U.S. values of transparency, sustainability, and democratic governance. Conclusion. The Belt and Road Initiative represents a significant shift in global economic dynamics, with implications for U.S. interests and the international order. While the potential for infrastructure development in participating countries is evident, the associated risks of debt dependency, geopolitical maneuvering, and the erosion of sovereignty cannot be overlooked. The U.S. response through initiatives like B3W and strengthened partnerships is essential to countering the influence of the BRI and ensuring a stable and equitable international economic landscape. The Belt and Road Initiative BRI poses various strategic challenges for the United States, affecting its geopolitical standing and influence in multiple regions. Below are the most prominent projects and aspects of the BRI considered threats to U.S. interests. 1. China-Pakistan Economic Corridor (CPC). This flagship project of the BRI involves an estimated investment of $62 billion, aiming to connect China's western provinces to the Arabian Sea. The Gwadar port is a vital logistical hub within CPC, which offers China strategic maritime access and enhances its influence in the Indian Ocean, a region of critical geopolitical importance to the U.S. and its allies. Concerns revolve around potential dual use of the port for military purposes, as it could accommodate Chinese naval vessels and serve as a base for projecting power in South Asia, challenging U.S. interests and alliances in the region. 2. Hambantota Port in Sri Lanka. This project exemplifies the debt trap diplomacy narrative, where a country becomes heavily indebted to China, leading to the leasing of strategic assets back to Chinese control. The 99-year lease of Hambantota port to a Chinese firm after Sri Lanka struggled to repay loans raises alarms about similar scenarios in other nations, potentially resulting in loss of sovereignty and geopolitical maneuverability. 3. Digital Silk Road. The BRI's focus on digital infrastructure allows Chinese technology firms such as Huawei to dominate telecommunications markets in participating countries. This raises cybersecurity concerns for the U.S., as these technologies could facilitate espionage or data manipulation by the Chinese government. The U.S. has responded with initiatives aimed at countering Huawei's influence, emphasizing the need for secure and trusted telecommunications networks. 4. Economic influence and regulatory standards. The BRI enables China to export its regulatory and technical standards, which may undermine existing international norms established by U.S. and Western models. This shift could alter the global economic landscape, favoring Chinese firms and diminishing the competitiveness of American businesses in key markets. 5. Debt-driven dependency. Countries participating in the BRI often find themselves in precarious debt situations, leading to economic and political dependence on China. This scenario can result in countries aligning their foreign policies with Chinese interests, which may counter U.S. objectives, particularly in regions like Africa and Southeast Asia. 6. Geopolitical alliances. The BRI is seen as a means for China to strengthen its ties with countries that may otherwise lean towards U.S. alliances. This is particularly evident in Central Asia, where China's investments could challenge U.S. influence and presence. The establishment of new trade routes and economic partnerships under the BRI framework could lead to a realignment of regional allegiances that marginalizes the U.S. 7. Health Silk Road and soft power. In the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, China has sought to leverage health diplomacy through the Health Silk Road, enhancing its influence in developing countries by providing medical supplies and infrastructure. This not only serves immediate humanitarian needs but also positions China as a benevolent global leader, contrasting with the U.S. response, which has been criticized for its handling of the pandemic. 8. Environmental concerns and standards. The BRI's focus on infrastructure often neglects environmental standards, leading to projects that may exacerbate climate change and biodiversity loss. This could create long-term geopolitical instability in affected regions, prompting migration and conflict that could require U.S. intervention. 9. Multilateral responses. The U.S. has initiated alternatives to the BRI, such as the Build Back Better World B3W initiative aimed at providing infrastructure investments that uphold democratic values and sustainable development. However, skepticism remains about the effectiveness of these initiatives in countering the allure of Chinese investments, especially in countries desperate for infrastructure and economic growth. 10. Strategic encirclement and military considerations. The BRI enhances China's ability to encircle U.S. military interests, particularly in the Indo-Pacific, through strategic investments in ports and infrastructure that could be utilized for military logistics in the event of conflict. This raises concerns about the U.S. military's operational capacity and freedom of movement in critical regions. In summary, the BRI represents a multifaceted challenge to U.S. interests encompassing economic, political, and military dimensions. The initiative's implications extend beyond mere infrastructure projects, potentially altering global power dynamics and eroding U.S. influence across various regions. As such, the U.S. response must be comprehensive and strategic to effectively navigate the complexities posed by China's ambitious global initiative. The Belt and Road Initiative BRI, launched by China in 2013, is more than just an ambitious infrastructure project. It serves as a focal point for geopolitical tension, particularly between China and the United States. While many discussions center on the overt economic and strategic implications of the BRI, several nuanced aspects often get overlooked yet are crucial in understanding the full scope of its impact on U.S. interests. Overlooked aspects of the BRI and their significance. 1. Debt sustainability and governance models. The narrative of debt trap diplomacy often oversimplifies the complex financial relationships formed through the BRI. Critics argue that countries participating in the BRI face mounting debts that compromise their sovereignty. However, it's essential to recognize that many of these nations willingly engage in such borrowing due to a lack of alternative financing options, coupled with China's readiness to invest in projects that the West might deem unfeasible. The BRI often bypasses established governance frameworks, leaving recipient countries vulnerable to inefficient project management, corruption, and lack of technical expertise. The implications for U.S. interests are profound. As these countries face economic distress, they may turn increasingly towards China for political and economic support, thereby diminishing U.S. influence. 2. Exporting authoritarian models. The BRI not only facilitates economic growth but also serves as a vehicle for China to export its model of governance. By financially supporting authoritarian regimes through infrastructure projects, China is effectively undermining democratic values and institutions in recipient countries. This trend can erode U.S. values and interests abroad, as countries that adopt or align with Chinese governance models may be less likely to support U.S. initiatives or cooperate on global issues like human rights and climate change. 3. Strategic port developments. While much attention is given to major projects like the Gwadar port in Pakistan or the Hambantota port in Sri Lanka, the broader implications of these developments are often overlooked. These ports are not just economic assets, they are strategic footholds for China in critical maritime zones. The potential for dual use of these ports, commercial and military, poses direct challenges to U.S. naval operations and regional security. As China secures more maritime infrastructure, it may be able to exert control over critical shipping lanes and influence regional geopolitical dynamics. 4. Technological standards and digital Silk Road. The BRI's digital Silk Road aspect is particularly significant as it allows China to set technological standards in telecommunications and digital infrastructure. As countries adopt Chinese technologies, they may inadvertently align themselves with China's digital governance model, which is often characterized by surveillance and control. This shift not only solidifies China's technological dominance but also raises concerns about data privacy and security for U.S. firms and allies. The implications extend to cybersecurity, as reliance on Chinese technology may expose countries to vulnerabilities that could be exploited for espionage or cyber attacks. 5. Environmental and climate impacts. The environmental ramifications of BRI projects are often glossed over. Many BRI initiatives prioritize rapid infrastructure development over sustainability, leading to significant ecological degradation. As countries grapple with the consequences of climate change, the long-term viability of BRI projects may come into question. The U.S. has a vested interest in global climate stability, thus China's approach to development under the BRI may undermine international climate efforts and complicate the U.S. position in global environmental negotiations. 6. Geopolitical fragmentation. The BRI has the potential to create geopolitical fragmentation, as countries that align with China may drift away from established U.S. alliances and partnerships. This is particularly evident in regions like Southeast Asia, where countries may find themselves caught between U.S. and Chinese interests. As countries choose to engage with BRI projects, they risk alienating traditional partners, which can lead to a reconfiguration of global alliances that diminish U.S. influence. 7. Health Silk Road and global health diplomacy. The recent emphasis on health infrastructure through the BRI, particularly in light of the COVID-19 pandemic, is another layer that warrants attention. China's ability to present itself as a global health leader by providing medical supplies and infrastructure can enhance its soft power. The U.S. must recognize that health diplomacy is increasingly becoming a battleground for influence. If countries perceive China as a more reliable partner in health crises, this could shift their allegiances away from the U.S. and its health initiatives. Significance of these overlooked aspects. The aspects of the BRI highlighted above are significant for several reasons. Strategic competition. The U.S. must understand that the BRI is not merely about infrastructure, it is about establishing a new global order underpinned by Chinese norms and values. Failing to recognize this will result in ineffective responses to the growing Chinese influence. Long-term policy development. The U.S. needs to develop coherent strategies that not only counter the BRI but also offer viable alternatives that align with U.S. values and interests. This includes promoting sustainable development, democratic governance, and transparent investment practices. International alliances. The U.S. should leverage its existing alliances to create a unified front against the challenges posed by the BRI. By collaborating with like-minded nations, the U.S. can promote an alternative vision for global development that upholds international norms and standards. Adaptation to new realities. The U.S. needs to adapt its foreign policy to the realities created by the BRI. This includes recognizing the importance of technology, digital infrastructure, and health as vital components of national security and international influence. In summary, understanding the multifaceted implications of the BRI beyond the immediate economic and infrastructural benefits will be critical for the U.S. as it navigates its strategic competition with China. The overlooked aspects of the BRI present both challenges and opportunities that require thoughtful analysis and proactive policy responses. For most valuable points for in-depth analysis and discussion regarding the China Belt and Road Initiative and its threat to the United States. 1. Debt trap diplomacy and sovereignty risks. The concept of debt trap diplomacy is central to the criticism of China's Belt and Road Initiative (BRI). This strategy involves extending unsustainable loans to participating countries, leading them into significant debt. Countries like Sri Lanka and Pakistan have already experienced severe economic repercussions as a result of these loans, which often favor Chinese companies and create long-term dependencies. The U.S. views this as a tactic for China to gain political leverage and strategic assets, potentially compromising the sovereignty of these nations. The implications of this practice extend beyond the individual countries involved. They pose a broader threat to U.S. interests by destabilizing regions and undermining alliances. Discussion should explore the mechanisms of debt trap diplomacy, the experiences of affected countries, and the potential responses from the U.S. and its allies to mitigate these effects. 2. Geopolitical rivalry and strategic competition. The BRI represents a significant component of the ongoing geopolitical rivalry between the U.S. and China. As the BRI expands, it allows China to increase its influence across Asia, Europe, and Africa, potentially undermining U.S. partnerships and its global standing. The U.S. has responded with initiatives like the Build Back Better World B3W, aiming to offer alternative infrastructure investments that align with democratic values and sustainable development principles. This strategic competition raises questions about the effectiveness of these countermeasures and the long-term sustainability of U.S. influence in the face of China's growing reach. Analyzing the dynamics of this rivalry can provide insights into how nations can navigate the complexities of global power shifts. 3. Economic and technical standards and their global impact. A key aspect of the BRI is China's attempt to export its economic and technical standards, which could reshape global regulatory frameworks in its favor. The Digital Silk Road, a component of the BRI, emphasizes the expansion of Chinese technology and surveillance capabilities. This aspect raises concerns about data privacy, increased surveillance, and the potential for a new form of digital colonialism. The U.S. is faced with the challenge of countering this influence while promoting its standards and technologies. Discussion should focus on the implications of China's push for technical dominance, the responses from the U.S. and its allies, and the potential for a competitive framework that upholds democratic values and human rights. 4. The China-Pakistan Economic Corridor (CPC) as a case study. The CPC is often cited as a flagship project of the BRI, exemplifying the broader implications of China's infrastructure investments. While it promises significant economic benefits for Pakistan, it has also led to rising debt, local discontent, and concerns over the potential for military dual use of infrastructure. The implications of CPC for U.S. interests in South Asia are profound, as it enhances China's strategic footprint in a region where the U.S. has historically sought influence. Analyzing CPC can provide a microcosmic view of the BRI's broader impact and the challenges faced by U.S. foreign policy in the region. This discussion can also explore the responses from local populations, the potential for conflict, and the U.S. strategies to counterbalance Chinese influence in Pakistan and neighboring countries. These 4 points encapsulate the multifaceted threats posed by the BRI to U.S. interests and provide a foundation for in-depth discussions regarding geopolitical strategy, economic policies, and international relations in the context of a rapidly changing global landscape. 1. The Marshall Plan 1948. After World War II, the United States implemented the Marshall Plan to aid the economic recovery of European nations. The plan provided over $12 billion, approximately $130 billion today, in economic assistance to help rebuild Western European economies. While it successfully stimulated growth and economic integration in Europe, it also served to counter the influence of the Soviet Union and communism in the region, establishing a long-term strategic advantage for the U.S. similar to the Belt and Road Initiative (BRI). The Marshall Plan was a significant foreign policy effort aimed at enhancing U.S. influence through economic support and infrastructure development. 2. The Eisenhower Doctrine 1957. This U.S. foreign policy initiative aimed to bolster American influence in the Middle East against the backdrop of increasing Soviet presence and influence during the Cold War. The doctrine promised military and economic assistance to Middle Eastern countries resisting communist aggression. The U.S. sought to contain Soviet influence through strategic partnerships and aid, reflecting a similar underlying motive as the BRI, which seeks to expand China's influence through infrastructure investment and development aid. 3. The U.S.-Japan Security Alliance 1951, established in the aftermath of World War II. This alliance was part of the U.S. strategy to counter communist influence in Asia, particularly in the context of the Korean War. The U.S. provided military protection to Japan in exchange for Japanese cooperation in regional security and economic policies. This partnership allowed the U.S. to maintain a strategic foothold in Asia, similar to how China aims to secure its influence through the BRI by establishing economic ties and strategic assets in participating countries. Future outlook: predictions for the impact of China's Belt and Road Initiative BRI on U.S. interests. 1. Geopolitical landscape shift. The BRI is likely to continue reshaping the geopolitical landscape, particularly in Asia, Africa, and parts of Europe, as countries increasingly rely on Chinese investment for infrastructure development. This could lead to a reallocation of global power dynamics. The U.S. may find itself needing to recalibrate its foreign policy to address the increasing influence of China in regions that have traditionally been under U.S. sway. 2. Debt diplomacy concerns. The ongoing narrative of debt trap diplomacy associated with the BRI will likely persist. As more countries become heavily indebted to China, there may be an increase in calls for U.S. intervention or support to mitigate potential crises. Nations may seek alternative financing options from the U.S. and its allies, leading to intensified competition between the U.S. and China for influence in developing economies. 3. Technological standards in Digital Silk Road. China's push to establish technological standards through the Digital Silk Road will become a significant area of contention as countries adopt Chinese technologies. The U.S. may face challenges in maintaining its technological hegemony. This could lead to further divides in global tech standards, with countries having to choose between aligning with U.S. or Chinese systems, potentially stunting multilateral cooperation. 4. Increased military presence. As China seeks to secure its investments in BRI countries, the potential for a greater military presence in key regions, particularly in the Indo-Pacific, is likely. China may establish more logistical and military bases under the guise of protecting its economic interests. This could necessitate a corresponding increase in U.S. military presence and readiness in these areas to counterbalance China's growing influence. 5. U.S. response through Build Back Better World B3W. The B3W initiative, launched by the G7, is expected to develop as a primary counter-strategy to BRI. The effectiveness of this initiative will depend on the ability of the U.S. to mobilize resources and foster partnerships to provide viable alternatives to BRI projects. A successful B3W could help re-establish U.S. influence in regions where BRI has gained a foothold. 6. Environmental and social governance (ESG) standards. As climate change and sustainability become increasingly pressing concerns, the U.S. could leverage the growing awareness of ESG standards to differentiate its investment proposals from those of China. By emphasizing sustainable development and ethical governance in its initiatives, the U.S. may regain credibility and attractiveness as a partner for infrastructure development. 7. Shifts in global supply chains. The COVID-19 pandemic has exposed vulnerabilities in global supply chains heavily reliant on China. This could lead to a significant shift as countries seek to diversify their supply chains away from Chinese dependency. The U.S. could play a key role in facilitating this transition, offering support and investment in alternative regions. 8. Increased regional alliances. The U.S. may strengthen regional alliances, particularly in the Indo-Pacific, to counterbalance China's influence. Such alliances could involve enhanced military cooperation, economic partnerships, and collective responses to BRI projects that are perceived as detrimental to regional stability. 9. public sentiment and domestic politics, growing public awareness of the implications of the BRI may lead to increased pressure on U.S. policymakers to respond effectively. As citizens become more informed about the geopolitical landscape and the potential risks of Chinese influence, domestic political dynamics could shift, demanding more assertive U.S. engagement. 10. Long-term strategic competition. The competition with China will likely remain a long-term strategic focus for the U.S. As the BRI continues to evolve, the U.S. will need to adapt its policies and strategies to address the multifaceted challenges posed by China's growing global presence. This ongoing competition will shape diplomatic, economic, and military strategies for years to come. In conclusion, the Belt and Road Initiative represents a significant challenge to U.S. interests globally. The U.S. response, characterized by strategic competition and the promotion of alternative development initiatives, will play a crucial role in shaping the future geopolitical landscape. As the BRI continues to expand, the U.S. must remain vigilant and proactive in addressing the implications of China's ambitions on its own interests and the broader international order.